So The Leadership is a documentary, a feature documentary, and it starts with a journey to Antarctica of 76 women with a science background. And they are taken on this journey by by a woman who wants to enhance their leadership skills, because she believes that if women in science, technology, engineering, maths, and medicine can have more of a seat at the table when it comes to leadership, that the world will be a better place. And the journey of the film is basically an expose about what it is that these women face, the obstacles that they face, but it's also about the leader of the expedition, her own leadership journey.
I'm very keen to know what the difference is between whether you had a concept for what the film would be like and what actually ends up on screen.
Yeah, well, I think that's a really good question. And I think in documentary, particularly this kind of documentary, an observational documentary, you always have to be open to what happens. But we went in knowing that all of the women who came on board were there for a reason. They weren't just kind of going to sort of go on this sort of month-long trip to Antarctica on this leadership initiative just because it was something good to do. They all made quite significant sacrifices to be there, and they'd all kind of encountered these obstacles in their professional lives that meant that they were just sort of hanging on in their careers despite desperately being committed to science. And so we knew that going in that they would all have personal stories that would kind of highlight this sort of bigger problem that exists in the STEM fields. Of course, we didn't know how it was all going to go on board. But it's certainly, as you see in the film, things definitely took a direction that we didn't expect. But we feel that we ended up with something far richer as a result.
The organic nature of the film as it evolved, when did that really start to make itself apparent that whatever idea you had of a bunch of women learning how to be leaders was actually going to go off in a lot of very interesting and illuminating tangents?
I think it was, listen, I can't pinpoint exactly when in the 21 days at sea that happened. But I do think that it, in retrospect, is no sort of surprise in a way, because these are really big questions about how do we change the nature of leadership? How do we get more diversity in leadership? How can we sort of make sure that our leaders reflect actually who we are? All of those questions are actually not easy to solve. And so I think when you have a whole bunch of people who have come on board because they have problems that in their professional lives that are sort of both personal but also systemic because of what they're facing, and they all want answers, and they've all been super excited to be kind of like, this is it, this is going to really help me. There's a lot of pressure placed on what's going to happen on board. So in a way, in retrospect, it's not surprising that that then there were conflicts about whether or not, well, is what I'm learning here really going to help me? Is this really about just me changing myself? Or should it really be about us changing wider systems? And I mean, that question right there is something that that we wrestle with in all kinds of arenas when we're trying to achieve any kind of change. So I think that in retrospect, it's not surprising that that ended up being a big part of the conflicts on the ship.
This may have been an editing decision on your part as a director, but the first sign to the viewer that this is going to be a rough ride is when Fabian Datner is holding a meeting and three women turn up half an hour late and she doesn't do what I think a good leader would do, which is basically make them explain to everybody else why they're half an hour late. Now, can you just tell me a bit about that scene? Was an explanation offered, or did you actually capture the fact that she's not doing what she needs to do, which is to really rake them over the coals a bit and get them to explain?
Well, see, I think that's a really, we did put that scene up early because it happened up early. I think it was in the first session on the ship, so chronologically that was part of our reason for making that decision. But we also put it up early because there were clues there about how the interaction between the leadership on the ship was going to go with the women on board. But I think what I have learnt through having audiences see the film is that what you find in that scene is in the eye of the beholder. Some people think it's hilarious. Some people think that I think, and I actually haven't heard your response, which is, did anyone ask why they were late? I think the answer to that is no. But I think, though, that the aim of putting that scene there is also because that's what happened, but also to sort of show, raise a sort of like a question in the mind of the audience of like, well, how is this all going to go actually?
I thought it was a very effective piece of foreshadowing.
Oh, good. That's good.
Yeah. Now, okay, we're going to get into some interesting territory here, because I don't know if the irony that underlies this voyage was intentional, or whether the irony that underlies a lot of the film is intentional. But I'll just start off by asking you, if you were aware that the entire enterprise was underpinned by irony, that the first homeward bound voyage was, in a sense, doomed to succeed.
Doomed to succeed? What do you mean?
That's a very, very intelligent question back at me, and I'll explain. As the first voyage, the brief stated in the film is it's exploratory. It's to find out how it goes. So all the faults and all the complaints that come up about how things are being handled are in fact fulfilling the brief of the journey. I'm going to read you a quote from the notes I took while watching the film.
Yeah.
Okay? Just when you start to feel guilty for thinking that what these women are being subjected to is a load of touchy-feely twaddle, some of the women face the camera and say that this is a load of touchy-feely twaddle. It didn't really matter how much the women complained about how things were going. That was part of the point of the journey. What say you?
Yeah, and I think Fabian says at the outset that this journey will be 60% as good as the next trip, as you know, and then the next trip will improve, and the next trip will improve, and I think that and I think that sort of as you say is the case, but I also think that people arrived on the ship with really high expectations, and you can see in that first scene when they all meet each other and Fabian's like, whoa, we did it. There's this real desire on everyone's part for this to be something absolutely amazing and groundbreaking. So at the same time as as you have a qualifier, or in some ways, that says, well, it's the first trip, so it may not be as good as the next one. Sometimes that desire for kind of improvement and to create something special together and to have answers about how to solve big problems in the world, kind of overrode that. And I should also just say that for those who haven't seen the film, that this voyage that went, called Homeward Bound, it was always the vision for this voyage to go once a year with a different cohort every year for 10 years. So it was a big, bold vision, and we just went on the first trip. Homeward Bound's perspective is that every year they've taken on all of that kind of feedback, and actually I think one of our characters in the film, Fern, she actually ended up sort of along with a bunch of other women who were dissatisfied with the journey, ended up deciding to improve it and really commit to it with feedback, and she's been on subsequent journeys.
You, as a director, were on the ship, directing the crew, filming the events. Ili, I really need to know how aware you were of the incident that occurred on board, the assault, the sexual assault that occurred on board. Did you know what had happened, or was that kept from you?
No, I did not know that had happened. I found out about it through the Grist article, which is as it kind of appears in the film, and it, as far as I know, it wasn't kept from me. I didn't. None of the crew had any knowledge of it, and I don't know that everybody on board had knowledge of it. And certainly, in those instances, it's really the not necessarily. It's the right of the victim to tell that story.
The whole issue about having children obviously is central to the whole idea of women in the workplace. It is unfortunate that if a woman leaves her job to have kids, that is a choice that she's making. And when she comes back to the job, in some instances, a position can be held for a woman, of course, but there is simply no way to stop the evolution of a workplace or things progressing that the woman, unfortunately, because she's taking care of a kid, is going to be unable to keep up with. It is brought up in the film. I don't know if you could have addressed that issue more. I just wanted to ask you about that.
Well, that was quite a personal, it was something that really resonated with me, because I, at the time of filming, had a 2-year-old, and then during the edit, well, actually we hadn't really started the edit properly, but after returning, I had a second child, and our wonderful producer, Greer Simpkin, said to me, if you can't have a baby making this film, then when can you have a baby? So our workplace, we did down tools and put things on hold for a while. So that is kind of an example of a fantastic workplace response, if you like. And I don't think that the film industry, like many industries, is really renowned for that. I think that what we were hoping to do in the film was to highlight the fact that this is an issue. There is an impact campaign that will run alongside the film that will enable people to have conversations and discuss different kinds of schemes and ideas that can work to alleviate this. One of the things that the women talk about in the film is that, the sort of like the idea that research kind of can't wait. So if you are taking, if you are not at work because you are fulfilling kind of caring responsibilities, that your research can't wait and just someone else has to do it. But there are schemes that are available that mean that that maternity positions can be filled and the research can kind of continue, and someone else can then come back, like, so I think that what we're really hoping with the film is a heightened awareness that this is actually a real problem, not just in STEM, but across many sectors, but then to have a conversation about the different kind of approaches that may work.
How has the film been travelling? What kind of response have you been getting?
We've been getting a great response. We've been getting response from women in STEM who are kind of saying, "Oh, this film really speaks to me." We've been also getting response from men who are seeing the film who are going, "Oh, I hadn't really thought about that before," or "This has made me have conversations with people who are close to me that have been really important and good to have." So the film's been traveling well, and we're really excited about an October cinema release.
Okay, so you were down there on the ship in Antarctica. You've got a couple of shots there of ice formations, of icebergs that just look absolutely, just utterly beautiful. Sculpted by the wind and by the currents and so on. Ili, were you ever tempted to just say, screw the documentary, let's just shoot the ice?
Well, I know that Dale Cochran, our cinematographer and drone operator, definitely was, he may have been thinking that, but he certainly kept it to himself. But he was, and we all were so excited on the days when we were able to take the drone up in the air to get those shots. There needs to be quite specific conditions for us to be able to do that, and actually even being able to get permission to use a drone in Antarctica is no easy feat, and our producer Greer Simpkin kind of works some magic to be able to allow us to film down there, because of course if a drone drops into the ocean because of some kind of malfunction, then you're polluting a pristine environment, and that would be the last thing that we wanted to do. And of course drones are even more difficult to operate at the poles because there's no GPS. So yes, but in answer to your question, was I ever tempted to just go stuff the documentary and I just want to go and look at the ice? I did have a couple of moments like that, but I knew that I couldn't. That was kind of not on the card. I do sometimes think, oh, I would love to go back to Antarctica and be able to be more present in the environment. But even though I had work to do, I have to say that it was an extremely special and affecting experience to be in that kind of wilderness, and an absolutely enormous privilege, I have to say.